depression, acceptance, and then sometimes it's said also meaning is the final stage of grief. So grief is a whole spectrum of emotion that we don't understand in the West. And when we experience it, it takes us aback, and we feel like we should be able to get over it, right? So let me just start with, actually reading from my personal journal, my reflections about reading Malidoma Some's work on grief, because I think it'll contextualize a lot of what we're doing today. Oops, where am I here? Okay, so let me just read some quotes from his book Ritual here, and then just see how they land in your body. For the Dagara, grief is seen as food for the psyche. Just as the body needs food, the psyche needs grief to maintain its own healthy balance. I'll read that one more time. For the Dagara, grief is seen as food for the psyche. Just as the body needs food, the psyche needs grief to maintain its own healthy balance. He also says, and I quote, "Grief is an energy that works at mellowing the mind, heart, and body." So, for Malidoma Some, for the Dagara perspective, grief is nothing more than unresolved energy moving through us so that we can be born anew. Grief is unresolved energy moving through us so that we can be reborn, so that we can change, so that we can transform, so that we can be initiated. Yeah, so again, pay attention to your body. Like Lucy felt there's some resistance, you said, to the first quote, and that's completely appropriate. So just be with whatever your experience is. Yeah. So the main point of everything that I read just now is this opening to what if grief wasn't something to get over or to resist? What if grief was an integral part of the human experience? And in fact, what if grief was a necessary part of transformation and growth? What if we can't really grow without grieving? And of course, not that we have to grieve all the time, right? Like again, in the West, we're extremists. And especially us Americans, we are extremists. If we read something, we think it is 100% or always that way, or that's the suggestion. And that's not at all what is being suggested here. It's not suggested that we worship grief and grieve all the time, and that's our new way of life. No. It's suggested here that we open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of accepting grief as part of and actually a necessary part of initiation. And the fact is we don't have initiation experiences in the West anymore. And so initiation is a process of midwifing yourself into a new way of being that usually involves an experience that is beyond your perceived abilities or capacity. So for many birthing people, many women who give birth, that process is initiatory. We don't know how we are going to do it. We just surrender to nature flowing through our bodies and we give birth, right? And that process is an initiation because it completely breaks down our perceptions of our abilities and our capacity. Traumatic experiences can be this way for some people if they're approached as initiations, right? Please do not seek out traumatic experiences to be initiated. But if you happen to be a trauma survivor, this is simply a possibility of how to view your experience. Maybe part of the experience is initiatory in some way. Not to say it should have happened to you, right? I want to be really careful about that. But there's a way that we can view our life experience in the absence of culturally seen and witnessed initiations. Our own personal experiences can be those for us if they do draw us wider, if they ask us to be more expansive than what we possibly have thought. So, how do you know that you need to grieve? Sometimes it's very obvious, like when you lose someone you love. And that's usually like the only time that our culture kind of condones the experience of grief for a certain period of time, right? Like our culture usually gives us like a year or so, or two maybe, and then like I think the popular understanding is, you really should be getting over this by now. And that's just not the case, because nobody can prescribe your time frame for grief for you. So when do you know that you need to grieve? Maybe if it's not obvious. And the answer is if you feel stuck or disconnected. You know that grief is needed. You know that there is an initiatory threshold that's needed for you. If you feel stuck, if you feel dissociated, disconnected, if you feel that you're bracing against life, if you feel that you're being held apart from life or separate from life, because grief brings us into the flow of life again. Because when we go through transformative experiences or experiences of loss, and we don't allow the grief to fully, if we don't allow the wave to completely come through our bodies and come to its natural end on its own terms, what happens is our heart closes and we build up scar tissue that braces us against life. Yeah. And Shannon says, bracing against life is so relatable. Absolutely. We love doing it in the West. We brace against life as a way of life because we want to control things, because we want to control outcomes, and we especially want to control ourselves. We especially want to control our emotions, which terrify us. So yes, bracing is a way of life in the West. It is the rule rather than the exception. And by the way, if you hear, or when you hear, there's a tapping sound that you may have noticed, like it just happened. Do you all hear that? That tapping sound is a bird that has been trying to come into that window in my house for 72 hours now. And there's nothing we can do about it. We've tried drawing the curtains. We've tried, putting things up in the window to deter it. And we just have to let it, speaking of not controlling, we just have to let it do its thing. It's a little, someone says, it's like a little finch type of bird, like a little brown bird. Oh, and I thought you say Happy Earth Day. He is a spirit. Oh, thank you. And someone says a lost loved one. I will definitely tune into that. Thank you for that perspective. The way I've been interpreting it, because I do personally, in my own spiritual journey, I see birds and animals as signs, right? So, or Adam, yeah, messengers, exactly. I've been meditating on what do I need to pay attention to, because it's literally like a rapping on the window, right? Tap, 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 tap. And I haven't received a clear answer, but I do know that, and I'm trying not to overanalyze it because that's definitely my default. But I do know that we're in a ridiculously intense, transformative cauldron on the planet and in all of our personal lives right now, including my own. So, and I know from experience that a lot of like synchronicity tends to happen in my life during these vortex times, right? Times of intensity and growth. So that's just kind of where I've left it. But yeah, I could also see the layer of it as, yeah, it's mating season. Maybe the bird just sees its own reflection and thinks it's a mate or something. There are all these different layers that we can acknowledge about an experience, right? The magical layer, the practical layer, the earthly layer, all these different layers. So in any event, that is what you hear on my window, is the tapping that I can do nothing about and just need to release control. So, yeah, so I want to bring in another aspect to why it's really vital for us to open to our difficult emotional experiences. And I will say that I think it's, in my experience, it can be particularly hard for folks who have ancestry in Northern European heritage. In other words, white folks. Because I think we've had generations of shutting down. We've had generations of bracing. Like I'm married to, my husband Carlos is Mexican American, and like my mom's partner is Cuban American, and so like a whole branch of my family is Latin, and so I definitely have that contrast to look at. Like I know that they experience things like grief and anger very differently, right? It seems to flow through them more spontaneously, and there is less shame that they have about feeling these things. But and of course, this is not meant to be a general statement of people of any heritage or race at all, because we are all unique. But yes, I've definitely noticed that for the majority of people with Northern European ancestry, this can be particularly hard because, as we know from epigenetics, we do inherit our ancestry, and the way our ancestors were in their bodies, we tend to inherit in our bodies, and it's just part of how DNA works. So if they braced against the world, if they braced against their own emotions, then we do too. Not to mention how parenting is passed along from generation to generation, which is the primary way I think that we inherit that. Because if feelings were not okay for you to express, if it wasn't okay for you to be upset growing up, if you heard stop crying, or if you were ignored when you experienced an inconvenient emotion, or if you had no, I'm seeing lots of hearts right now, so this is resonating. Basically, anyone who's attracted to my work experienced emotional neglect as a child. That's just a blanket statement I've learned to make. Like, yeah. So, and basically, if you're going to a live today that's called opening to grief and anger, it means that you feel in some part of you closed to it, right? Which probably almost indubitably, I just said indubitably, almost indubitably means that you were raised in a way where you didn't feel free to grieve, to feel sorrow, to feel anger, right? So I'm just calling that as it is. So in just a few minutes, we're going to be doing a little practice together, where we will just experiment with what we might be bracing against feeling in our bodies. But I do want to talk just a little bit about anger too before we do that practice, because the reason that I paired grief and anger in this live today is, number one, because they're often part of the same swirl of experience. So often anger is just part of grief, right? So I'm sure many of you have lost someone or lost part of yourself, a job or part of your identity, and felt some anger about it, right? That's just a natural part of anger is a response to something we value being in jeopardy. It is a natural mammalian self-protective response. Anger is, and I teach a lot about this in my online programs and elsewhere too. Like, anger is absolutely part of our spiritual healthy experience. Anger is a physiological response to injustice. Anger is a response from our autonomic nervous system. And this is really important for everyone to know. Anger is the natural mammalian response to injustice. It is a normal, healthy part of your nervous system. Feeling anger is not a choice. How we respond out of it is a choice. So part of opening to anger is experimenting with letting go of any cultural or family inheritance that you learned that anger was not okay to feel, right? Anger is absolutely okay to feel. Is it okay to act out of anger in a way that hurts other people? No, that's not okay, right? But we tend to couple the two. Like, we tend to not be able to even conceptualize what healthy anger even looks like. What does it even look like, right? Because when we think about anger, we usually imagine a violent reaction or yelling or something out of control, right, Tom? Like something you experienced in your childhood, or that we experienced in our childhood, of toxic anger. But the reality is that big reactions like that, violent reactions or abusive reactions out of anger, are actually the discharge of previously repressed anger. That is not a normal expression of anger. So I will tell you what an example of the healthy expression of anger is. Setting a boundary. Setting a boundary in a calm way with someone, saying, when you do this, I observe that when you do this, I feel frustrated, or I feel helpless, because I need more help, or I need to have a clean kitchen to feel sane in the morning. Would you be willing to wash the dishes at night, or help me wash the dishes at night, so that I can have more clarity in the morning to take care of our daughter? That structure I use is called nonviolent communication. And that's something that you can definitely look into if you want to see examples of boundary setting, like very, very concrete, like this is exactly what you can say to set a boundary. But so nonviolent communication is that body of work by Marshall Rosenberg. Yeah, Josephine, NVC, yeah. NVC is a fantastic way to set boundaries. But this is all to come back to the idea that healthy expression of anger that doesn't hurt anyone is boundary setting. It takes a lot of practice. That's true. It takes a lot of practice. And it doesn't mean that it's not scary at the time. Even if you practice it, like I've been practicing NVC for years with my husband, and I always feel my heart rate increase, even though I know that he's totally on board and he does it too, right? It takes a lot of practice, and it's about holding your systemic activation, right? Holding the fear, the heart rate increase, the sweating at the same time as you lovingly guide yourself forward and say what you need to say. Yeah, it does take courage, and it's so worth it. Absolutely. So I feel I feel like I'm kind of like jumping like from the tip of the iceberg to the tip of the iceberg on these topics, but that's kind of what lives are like anyway, right? But I do want to also make sure to note that another reason it's really, really vital for us to open to our own experiences of grief and anger is that is because of shadow projection. So one principle of shadow work is that everything that is unresolved within us, everything that is still in shadow, or in other words, unconscious within us, we project onto others in the form of judgments. So this is one principle of shadow work, right? And so, oh, Hema, yes, I'm right about to go there. So thank you for bringing that up. Yes. So because of shadow projection, in other words, like we feel really triggered when we see someone else expressing an emotion that is still unresolved within us, right? That's one principle of shadow projection. So if we want to live in an inclusive world, if we want to be able to really hear and listen to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and their experiences, which include absolutely justified anger, we need, especially as folks inhabiting white bodies and with this, Northern European heritage, it's our responsibility to open to these experiences within ourselves so that we can listen with an open heart and learn from people whose lived experiences are so different from us. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why opening to grief and anger are really, really important at this time in history, both for ourselves in our own personal lives, for greater empathy and compassion for people who are different from us. We just need to increase our capacity to hold the charge of strong emotions that many of us have spent our lives bracing against and trying to stop at all costs. So let's start with a little experiment. So I want to we won't do like a huge practice today, because this is really personal and it could have the potential to be quite activating for some people. So I don't want to go deep into it, but I do want to give you the opportunity to be with your own internal process here in just a moment. So I'll explain what the invitation will be, and then I'll give you a little disclaimer about it. So the invitation is, I'm going to be asking you to sit with yourself and we'll get grounded together. And I'll ask you just to hold the part of you that you experience as your center. And just to simply ask your body, ask your wisdom, or if you work with like a higher self, or I like to call it in myself, my ancient self. If you work with a spiritual part of yourself, you could address that. But anyway, ask yourself, what am I trying not to feel? And we're just going to sit with that as an open invitation. So you can see how this might take you to an uncomfortable place. And part of that is the intention, because the work is how to be with these uncomfortable places in a space of compassion with ourselves. Before we go into that, though, part of the grounding process is I'm going to invite you to find a space in your body that either feels safe to you, or neutral, or less dangerous, or less bad. So we're going to anchor in that place first, and then we're going to ask our bodies the question, what am I trying not to feel? With the knowing that you can toggle back into that safe or safe enough place in your body if anything feels too much. As a trauma-informed practitioner, that's how we need to work with our nervous system, right? We always need a place of safety to return to, or a place of less danger or more neutrality if safety is inaccessible. But also, if you're someone who has a history of anxiety attacks or PTSD, or if this just all sounds really too uncomfortable for you, please don't feel like you need to practice along today. And know that I am recording this, and if you like, you can just listen today and assess if you feel like you want to do this at some point. So just really want to open the door and encourage everyone to just take care of yourselves, and that this might not be the time for you to do this right now. And that's completely okay. In our culture, we think because we worship at the altar of productivity and efficiency and more is better, we tend to have this attitude about our healing too, which is completely counterproductive, right? We tend to have the attitude, if I try harder, I'm going to get more value out of it. What we know from the nervous system, how the nervous system works, is that completely runs counter to how we're built. We need periods of rest, just as we need an inhale and an exhale. So that's all to say, do not force anything here. Do not try hard here. Simply approach this process with open curiosity. And maybe you will want to come out or look around the room or open your eyes or just not do it at all. All right. And yes, Chris, the recording will be available on Insight Timer probably in a few days or by the end of the week. So yeah. All right, everyone. So we're going to start just with a really simple grounding meditation. So if you feel comfortable with it, you can close your eyes and just sit or lie down in a way that feels nourishing to you. And take a few breaths here and just take a moment to arrive at this time and place. Noticing how your body is feeling right now at the prospect of going inward, and perhaps experiencing something that you've been trying not to feel. How does that show up in your body? Just taking some breaths here. And so I invite you to open your curiosity to ask, is there anywhere in my body that feels like it could be a safe place right now? In other words, is there a place in your body that you feel a pleasant sensation, like a warmth or a light tingling? Or a sense of openness or expansiveness, whatever sensation you might call pleasant or neutral. If you feel like sharing on the comments, I'd love to hear some of the places in your body that are lighting up for you as safe or neutral or even less bad, less dangerous. Your heart center, someone says, or it could be if something in the center of your body feels too much, maybe it's your hands, the aliveness in your hands, or I love that, Aneta, your thumbnail, that's great. Maybe it's your right toe. Jessie says the center of my palm, I love that. Excuse me. Yeah, the hands are a good place to ground in. Someone has crystals in their hands. I love that. Good. So wherever you're putting your awareness right now that feels safe, neutral, or less bad, just experiment with holding your attention there for as long as it naturally stays, and just breathing and allowing the sensation that's there to expand a little bit. Almost like a drop of food coloring in water expands out. And it doesn't need to be much at all. Just see how much it naturally wants to expand. Maybe just a millimeter, or maybe into more of your body. It doesn't really matter. Just notice. Yeah, breath as you notice this place in your body. And notice how there's a possibility that this place could be a refuge that you return your awareness to. If anything today or down the road feels like it's unsafe or too much, too fast, that you can simply toggle your awareness back to this place in your body or anywhere else that might feel safe, neutral, or less bad, and really notice the sensation that's there as your anchor. Okay. And so stay here for as long as feels nourishing for you. Also, if maybe that's going to be the whole rest of the session for today. If you feel called, I invite you to place your hands anywhere that you identify as the center of you, or maybe it's that place that feels safe in your body. Just place your hands anywhere that feels good. Notice the sensation of your hands on your body. And we're going to send this question into all of your cells. Send this question to reach the deepest part of you. And we're going to just take whatever answer you get. The first impression is the truth. And so the question that you're sending in now is, what am I trying not to feel? What am I trying not to feel? Hearing the word or perhaps phrase or sentence that you hear. And breathing into your body how it feels to hear that. If anyone feels moved to share what they heard, I would love to hear it. Otherwise, just stay with your experience. What am I trying not to feel? Yeah, so breathing into it. For some of you, it might be a word or a phrase. For some of you, it might be an image. For some of you, it might be even a movement that your body is making. So keep holding yourself if your hands are contacting your body. Just keep holding yourself, and I invite you to just experiment with just a little bit of rocking, just very gentle, either forward and back like this, or maybe a little bit back and forth. Just a little bit of rocking here as you acknowledge what's unfelt. Yeah. Knowing that I'm not asking you to feel this all the way right now unless it organically is coming out of your system. I have profound faith that with acknowledgement that this emotion will be processed by you in exactly the right way on your own time. This is not about releasing an emotion, quote unquote, or feeling it all the way to get rid of it, right? This is about acknowledgement and acceptance right now. So just experimenting perhaps with this rocking in your body, with eyes either closed or open, whatever feels right. And breathing. And so another layer you could add to this if you feel called is to let your body now do what it wants to do here. What I mean is, if your posture could be pulled into a certain natural pose that this emotion wants to go to, what would that be? And don't think about this, please. Don't think about like, oh, if I feel sad, how could I put my body to look like I'm sad? This is about letting your body move you instead of moving your body. So is there a pose that your body longs to take when you acknowledge, for example, this loneliness or this despair? For instance, is it a curling forward or a holding yourself and protecting your heart, or even a bowing of the head? Or maybe if it's anger, which I saw some of you experiencing, maybe you want to make a pose like a big cat or a predator and just... But again, don't think about it. Just let your body, maybe it's also a movement, maybe it's shaking, maybe it's thrashing around or even hitting a pillow. And know that there's no pressure to do any of this. Just only if it feels natural. You can stay with any layer of this process. Maybe you're still just staying with the word of the feeling that's been unfelt. Just continuing to breathe with whatever layer you're working with here. And we're going to, if you feel called, there's another layer to this that you could add, and that is to ask your whole being the question, what is needed for me right now? What is needed for me right now? Maybe just continuing to rock with yourself as you hold your hand to your body and feel what is needed for me right now. Just hearing what you hear. In a moment, we're going to begin to come out, but just really let in whatever else you need to let in here. feeling in your body, how it's landing for you to hear what you heard about what you need. By the way, for those of you who came in a little bit later, the tapping sounds are a bird that's been trying to come in my window for over 3 days. And Martha, yes, this is being recorded and I'm going to post it on Insight Timer in a few days. Yeah. Okay. So turning your attention, everyone, again to that place of safety in your body, or the place of neutrality or less bad now. Just really coming home to that place. Shifting your attention to that space within you and noticing the body sensation there. Is it warmth, openness, a lightness perhaps? Breathing in that sensation in that part of you, inviting it to expand. As you start to come back into grounding, into this refuge in you. Knowing that if you experience any feelings like nausea or any other physical sensations, that this is a normal part of the process, and just take care of yourself in whatever way you need. Yeah. And so whenever you're ready, everyone, of course, stay with this as long as you need to. Stay with whatever layer of this process feels right for you. If you would like, you can come back now, and if eyes are closed, go ahead and open them. And I invite everyone to just look around your space now. Just let your eyes wander around as you orient yourself again. Take some breaths as you come to this time and place. And invite your body to move you a little bit. So sometimes when we come out of a meditation, we have these reflexive, habitual movements. Like I'll just roll my shoulders or do some neck stretches. And I invite you to just try something a little bit different. Try, instead of moving your body now, try allowing your body to move you, which is probably going to be a smaller movement. So like if I allow myself to do that right now, I kind of am bending, like my head is bending in a weird way, or there's like some twitches, but just give your body permission to move you right now, because you just were in a very powerful place, and there might have been things that you discovered that have been unprocessed and unseen. And so I want to allow your nervous system to integrate in whatever way it naturally would. So yeah, and Chris, if you just want to keep rocking yourself, 100% do that. Go with whatever your body is wanting to do right now, and just keep doing that as we continue to talk today. I invite everyone to just, nobody can see each other's videos, right? So just do whatever you need to do. If you've ever come to any of my lives that I call Dance to Heal, that's really where I share a lot more of the somatic teachings and the nervous system repair stuff that we're just like touching the tip of the iceberg on here. Like, that we do some weird stuff because we're letting our body move us, and those aren't going to be like the socially condoned ways of movement, right? So yeah, for the rest of today, and I'll be staying, I usually stay for, glad you love those sessions, Chris. I usually stay after for about 10 or 15 minutes to help everyone integrate, process, to answer any questions, or to offer any support. that anybody might want after doing work like this. So maybe you have some questions, or I would actually love to hear anyone's experience if you feel like sharing. Kimberly, yeah, I'm planning on doing one of the Dance to Heal sessions pretty soon. Just stay tuned. If you're part of the Shadow Work Circle, which I encourage everyone to check out here on Insight Timer, I always post, I either post like polls for what people want for the next live session, or I'll tell what I'm planning for live sessions on our Shadow Work Circle. So make sure to join that. Thank you for your donation, Shannon. I'll do my little donation dance. Yay. Excuse me. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your donations. They really do make an impact. So thank you. Oh, glad that was helpful for you, Adam. So Lisa says, that was powerful. I was crying and telling my passed on dad all the things he did that hurt my brother and me. I feel calmer and more at peace now. I love that, Lisa. Yeah. And Johanna says, quite a transformation just now, from anxiety and sadness to compassion for myself. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, Johanna. Yeah, so I mean, anxiety is a complicated phenomenon, right? And as someone who's struggled with nightly anxiety attacks, I intimately get that it is a complex experience and it's unique to each one of us. But I think for a lot of people, anxiety can be a response to having a lot of grief or anger that your body is bracing against. It's like when we're avoiding feeling, when it feels like too much to feel, when our system doesn't have the capacity to feel safe enough and also feel the feelings that are repressed. I think for a lot of folks, anxiety results from that. I know that after giving birth, 20 months ago, it was a traumatic experience for me, and my nervous system got quite, because of PTSD, my nervous system got quite narrowed, and I couldn't handle much charge. And so I think my own personal anxiety attacks were in part a result of like my own nervous system becoming very narrow, and there being a lot of grief just from the transformation and initiation of motherhood that was trying to move through my system. And I couldn't move it. I had to do a lot of nervous system repair work in order to have the capacity to feel what I needed to feel, in order to feel safe enough in my body to feel the feelings that I needed to feel. So there's lots of layers, and it's different for everyone. So if I see a few people saying you were crying the whole meditation. Yeah. So remember what Malidoma Somé said. Again, if you weren't here in the beginning, Malidoma Patrice Somé is a teacher I have learned a lot from. He's an elder of the Dagara people of West Africa. His teachings on grief are in part that we need grief to balance our system. Grief is a natural part of letting go and of growing. So we basically need grief in order to transform, in order to be reborn into the new phase of our life. And so grief is the expression of what has been. Grief is the movement of unprocessed energy through us. That's all it is. It's the movement of unprocessed energy through our body. And for a lot of us, we experience that in crying. Crying is that movement of that unprocessed energy. It's just that most of us, primarily growing up in the West, most of us have a whole lot of conditioning to feel shame for crying, right? Which is one of the reasons why an Indigenous perspective is so immensely valuable. Yeah. Susan, I'm just scrolling here as I look. So Lisa says, I didn't get a clear answer on what I am pushing back, but I was crying the whole meditation. That's amazing and perfect. So our rational minds really want to know why, right? But our bodies to heal, we don't need to know why. And we know this from contemporary trauma research and trauma healing, is that you don't actually need to go back to traumatic memories to heal them. We can heal the imprint in our bodies and in our nervous systems without reactivating and revisiting the trauma or knowing why, right? Yeah. So Anna says, my anger had me feeling paralyzed, but wanting to yell at myself to do something about it. So Anna, I want to make sure you're not abusing yourself. So just know that your anger is absolutely valid and important and is telling you a message about what you value. And so we have a lot of conditioning that we shouldn't feel anger, but anger is a natural process in your body. Remember, it's always okay to feel anger, but it's not always okay to react out of anger, right? And that's a really important distinction that we need to make. It's always okay to feel anger. We can't control if we feel anger. We can control how we respond out of the anger. Okay, wait a second here. Josephine has a very important post that I have to scroll to read. Okay, Josephine says, I felt curious about shadow work for a while. I think I need it. My partner is dying. Yeah. I love and give and hold down our day-to-day lives. I am honored to walk this path with him. I also never experienced such dramatic spectrum of emotions. My nervous system is pretty shot. Long story short, I know I'm pushing down a lot just to get through the day. Therapy helps, but I'm ready to explore other ways to process these emotions, and so much change. I haven't been able to cry recently and I miss it. Had a little spontaneous cry with this practice and it felt really good. I'm glad to hear that. I like that you noted it's not about release or resolving or getting over it, but about processing, integrating, honoring. Love the nervous system info as well. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Josephine. Yes. So I'm holding you in my heart, Josephine, and I'm so honored that you're here today with us, with everything you're going through. And I know that I see so much love going out to you from others on this call. And I absolutely want to note that that we can't always feel in the moment, right? Sometimes we're just going through and getting through the day to day. And that's completely okay that you can't cry sometimes. It's like we just need to get through it sometimes. And we will feel and process in exactly the right time for us. And with something like you're facing, it's going to take a long time. So I'm really like, I'm tearing up too, just feeling with you. And also I'm tearing up with beauty at your courage for showing up to this process with all that you're going through. Because it takes courage for anyone to do this kind of acknowledgement work, but especially if you're going through what you're going through. Yeah. And my stomach just rumbled in agreement with all that. Oh, so Josephine says, thank you, Catherine. I feel that. Thank you, all of you. I immediately feel self-conscious about telling a bit of my story. I don't think it's more important than anyone else's. We are all beings experiencing. It's so true. Yeah. Yeah, and it's normal to feel self-conscious, right? It's normal to feel self-conscious for, like, quote unquote, taking up space, right, in a public forum. And it takes huge courage. And I am so grateful for your share because, I teach a lot, in these lives and also in my courses. And I can tell you that anytime anyone shares a personal story, it impacts everyone. And we all feel resonant with it in our own unique ways, even if we're not sharing, a similar experience. But it gives us permission to feel our shared humanity and I honor you and bow to you for giving us all the opportunity to feel that with you. Yeah. Yeah. Any other any other sharings or questions that anyone else has? Yeah, Anna says, humanity is the community that is needed to rebuild us in times of need. Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's a huge part of our collective evolution right now. Oh, Elle says, the bird that was tapping on the window has taken a pause since our meditation. Yeah, good observation. Priscilla asks, what is a sufficient time frame to get over the ending of a love relationship? I cannot tell you that. There's no sufficient time frame. We all need to ride the waves of what's moving through us and to ride them all the way to the end, to their natural ends. And yet it's absolutely devastating and painful to feel these feelings, right? When anything ends or with any kind of a loss. And so I absolutely understand wanting to have a notion of a sufficient time frame because it makes it containable, and what's most terrifying is the unknown, right? Yeah. And I know that like when I was like in my postpartum journey, when I had chronic acute insomnia, like I was desperate for something like that. I was desperate to hear like a time frame, or to have a doctor or a therapist tell me like, you can expect to get over this in this amount of time, right? And honestly, sometimes I kind of invented one for myself just to have something. So I completely get that. Like, you might just invent something for yourself. I'll give myself a year and then reevaluate, but just don't have the expectation that it's going to be quote unquote gone in a year, right? Like one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is that the things that we go through, whether it's loss or trauma, we do not release them. There's a lot of kind of half-baked trauma healing out there that kind of guides like quote unquote trauma release, and the fact is we don't release the trauma. We don't get rid of the experiences in our lives. What we release is its hold on us. And who we are becomes big enough to hold it all. So if you imagine like the healing process, it's that you are getting bigger. It's not that you're getting rid of your lived experience or what's happened to you, but you can start to have choices. It doesn't have a hold on you anymore. So Chris says, I have chronic grief from my past career and life. How can I daily release and accept myself now to create a new fulfilling life? Yeah. So I would first of all say have support, right? So I hope that you have like either you have someone or people in your life you can share your heart with, whether that's friendships or a therapist or someone like that, because we can't go through this alone. We just can't. We're not wired that way. And we often need companionship or support of some kind in order to really grieve all the way, I've noticed. And this is another thing that Malidoma Somei's teachings on grief have shown me, is that in the Dagara practices and grief rituals, it's always in community. They always grieve together. It's always the whole tribe, the whole group is grieving together. The women start to wail and they walk through the village and everyone knows someone's died because the women have begun wailing. And pretty soon everybody is wailing and flailing around and feeling their grief together. This is the water that we need to quench our modern wasteland, right? The modern wasteland of loneliness is in need of community, is in need of collective experience of grief and feeling. But the best thing we can do in the culture that we live in now is often to feel our feelings with the witnessing of a therapist or friends or family. So, Chris, I would just make that intention somehow, that to be in some kind of community or witnessing with what you feel. Because if something is chronic, it could mean that part of you is bracing against feeling it all the way. And just like what Carl Jung says, what we resist persists. So oftentimes when we feel stuck, it's because we're not feeling feelings all the way through. We're not letting the wave make its full arc through us. And usually we do need to have support of another person witnessing for that wave to move all the way through. Okay, Chris, I'm glad to hear that you're in therapy, and hopefully it's with therapists you feel connected to. Yeah, let me just scroll a little bit. I missed some stuff. Christine says, I try and shift my thinking about a recovery timeline as an ongoing roller coaster ride that slowly evens out but still can have big dips and highs. Yeah, I love that. There's a quote that I love that a friend of mine gave, and I don't know who said it, but it's something like, we open and we close, and that's how the music happens. We open and we close, and that's how the music happens. So I know the more I go through, the more I've aged. I'm 36. A lot of people think I'm like 26. Anyway, the more I've aged, the more I've gone through, the more I realize that the human experience is about this opening and closing. It's not about attaining anything. It's not about a certain idea of success that might externally look a certain way. It's about being able to let life flow through us. And the healing process is about opening our hearts so that life can flow freely through us, and so that you can feel feelings naturally as they come up without bracing against them. And when we do this, the feelings arise and they might be quite intense, but then they also change and shift and move quicker and quicker through us. So for example, in my own place on this healing journey right now, not to say it's better or worse than where anyone else is, but just where I personally am at, I cry super easily at things, but then I also shift. Like I find that the tears come and they're really intense. And sometimes I cry on these lives, or I cry when I'm teaching elsewhere, and I don't feel any shame over it because it's feeling moving through me, and then it's over and I'm feeling something else. So this is my own experience of how this journey of opening and closing has worked for me. And what I notice is that I have more nervous system capacity to be with my life. So I'm a mom to a toddler, right? So this is really important. Or like a real world example of this is that so my dad, without getting into a whole story about my past, my dad has been an incredibly triggering figure in my life, and I hadn't really seen him for an entire year, and because of COVID and stuff, and he got vaccinated, so he came over to visit. In the past, I would have freaked out, cleaned my house, made sure my daughter's hair was all straight and in pigtail, like he's on the spectrum, so he expresses that in a very perfectionist kind of way. So I would have made sure like everything in my house is beyond reproach. But you know what? When he came the other day, after I've done a year of this intensive nervous system healing work and personal work, I almost didn't even think about him visiting, to be honest. Like he just came. I hadn't cleaned my house. And I was able to just be present with him and actually let him be who he is. And I was myself, and I was not activated by him, right? I didn't have an increased heart rate. I wasn't sweating. I wasn't feeling unsafe. So of course I was uncomfortable. Like, I wasn't exactly comfortable in my father's presence, right? But the healing is in the choices that I had. And this is what I mean by the trauma doesn't release, it just releases its hold on us. All of the trauma from my past related to my dad is still part of who I am and will always be. But the difference in my healing work, the difference my healing work has made is that it doesn't control me anymore, right? I have choices. I can be myself, and I can let my dad be himself, which is, someone who's doing his best and who is on the spectrum and doesn't have capacity to be present for emotion in a way that I need. And so I've released my expectation that he is present in that way for me, after 2 decades of healing work. But I have to admit that the somatic work I've done in the past year, the nervous system healing, is what ultimately made the biggest difference for me. So, yeah. And if you're curious as to what that is and what that consists of, I highly recommend the book Call of the Wild by Kimberly Ann Johnson that just literally came out. It's called Call of the Wild by Kimberly Ann Johnson. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner, a nervous system and trauma healing expert. She has a whole other list of certifications, but she is my teacher of somatic work and trauma healing work. So Call of the Wild by Kimberly Ann Johnson will be a fantastic resource for you if you want to dive deep into your own nervous system healing and free yourself. Yeah, Chris, I'm glad that resonates with you. The trauma doesn't release, but we release its hold on us. Yeah, that's very important. All right, everyone. Well, the bird's back tapping on the window again. So I feel it's time for me to go tap, tap, to go get my husband and baby and say bye to everyone. So let me just do a refresh, because I know that you all often want the book recommendations again. And by the way, we can also recommend and talk about these books in the Shadow Work Circle on Insight Timer here. So make sure to join our little Shadow Work Circle. It's not little, it has 200 people, but it's just a beautiful community. And we can all talk more about this in the Shadow Work Circle later if you want. So again, I shared these books by Malidoma Somé, Ritual, which talks specifically about grief ritual and Dagara tradition. And then Of Water and the Spirit is his story of being Dagara, growing up Dagara, being abducted, honestly, by a French priest, as they used to do all the time, and brought to seminary school to be to learn French and to be. So he was taken away from his village, abducted when he was like a toddler. When he was 19, this is like the Cliff Notes version of his life. When he was 19, he found his way back to his village, and he had to relearn the Dagara language and the traditions and get initiated. And so he went on to get 2 PhDs from Western institutions. Malidoma Somé did. And so his whole life is this amazing bridge between indigenous African tradition and the West. So he just has this incredible perspective. So I really recommend Of Water and the Spirit and Malidoma Somé's work. And so also for specifically nervous system healing, trauma work, Call of the Wild by Kimberly Ann Johnson is just an incredible book. And it literally came out last week. But she's been my teacher for years of this somatic work. So, all right, everyone. Well, I will see a lot of you in the Shadow Work Circle, and look for me in a few weeks back live here, and wishing you all a beautiful day. And thank you so much to all of you. And make sure to keep tuning into the sensations in your body today, especially the ones that feel safe or pleasant or just neutral or less bad, because that's the foundation of nervous system resilience building, is always being able to return to something like that. Okay. Tap, 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 tap. Bird says it's time to go. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Love to all of you, and I'll see you again soon. Okay.